How's it going, and welcome to No Fun Lads Guide series on Waterdeep Dragon Heist, a 5th edition module. Today we're going to be diving into the latter half of the 3rd chapter. Of course, there is going to be a ton of spoilers, so players don't watch this. But DMs that want added insight, go ahead and stick around because we have a lot to cover here. And here it is, the Graalhund Villa. Your players are going to arrive here under a myriad of circumstances. Either they're going to follow one set of trails or another, they're just going to be led along by someone holding their hands. Whatever the case may be, your players will eventually find their way here. But the thing is, the very first thing we have to consider is, your players are chasing after that Stone of Galore, but are your players going to do it on their own, or are they going to utilize the guards? We're going to be covering that very soon. The first thing that we want to go over here is the story. So once Urstelfloxen made his way back to the Graalhund Villa, there he confronted the Graalhunds, and a scuffle went down, and Urstelfloxen got held in captivity, and now there's a great schism between the Graalhund guards and the Zhentarim located in here. And it is now finally here where the choice of villain dictates the course of the campaign. As we can see here, your choice of villain will decide why Yala Graalhund betrayed Urstelfloxen by sending a fireball at him. And honestly, this list is great. No matter which villain it is, that is an excellent motivation to go ahead and backstab anybody. Whether because she is trying to make greater allies, or she's trying to appease her lover, or whatever the case may be in here, it is absolutely fantastic. So run with it. Absolutely explore the depths of the content here, because those villains should be foreshadowed, and the interaction that your players are going to have with people that interact with that enemy that you have are going to tie in the story oh so well. So the Zhentarim are put away by the Graalhunds in the villa, but eventually Urstelfloxen is able to kill his guards, and then a war ensues. This place is a veritable bloodbath as the Zhentarim and the Graalhund guards are going to war against each other, and eventually some commoners, some Graalhund workers, are caught up in it, and some of them are slain. Your players could theoretically arrive right in the middle of this combat, but here's the thing. Your players can approach this a number of different ways. Your players could decide to stake this place out over days and days. Your players could just decide to go ahead and call in the guards. Your players could make a big old scuffle about it. The book somewhat assumes that your players are going to storm in, or you're just going to call in the guards. In which case, if you call in the guards, there's an excellent list here where their guards are going to go ahead and go in and discover what is located in here. Awesome detail and information. And if you want to add some awesome taverns to the city of Waterdeep, I cannot recommend enough that you check out Foxglove Armor and the amazing maps she's putting out there. And in addition, join the Discord, join the Reddit. There is a ton of maps already provided there, and of course, there is just a great community that you get to interact with and discuss their experiences on how their adventures went down, and you can go ahead and bounce great ideas off of them. The community is super active, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and people will get to you, I promise. It is an absolutely amazing experience. Please go ahead and join. And unfortunately, during the whole police investigation, the Nimblewright is going to slip out, and that is a big deal because the Nimblewright is in possession of the Stone of Galore. So your players presumably either watch this, or they plead and beg and go ahead and join the guards as they storm this place, and then they'll discover that the Stone of Galore is not here. So this is just great detail if the guards get involved. But before we go on to your players investigating the villa, I want to go ahead and talk about staking the place out, because I hear that happens quite a lot, and in fact that actually happens in some of the games that I've ran. So your players decide to go ahead and stake this place out for a few days, maybe even a 10-day or theoretically more. They go ahead and just walk around this place all day and night. They try and set up some people to watch. They go ahead and go to the tavern across the street. Whatever the case may be, your players go ahead and just observe this place. So how do you go ahead and describe what's going on? Well, I would go ahead and tailor that to how long you think that your players are going to take. Because you could go ahead and have it where things look honky-dory in here, people are going about their daily lives, and then at some point, this place goes a little bit quiet. And then if you have the curious people, they're going to go ahead and go in themselves, or if they don't feel like doing it themselves, that's when they go ahead and call the cops. But go ahead and tailor that to your own group's desires. Make sure that they feel involved, make sure they feel like they are someone participating in this adventure. So finally we get to the point where your players decide to go ahead and storm this place and see what's going on. And during the outside investigation, they're not going to really discover too much. Of course, there is the shadows in area 2, but we'll be getting into that in a moment. It's really, they're going to find all the scary stuff going down inside of the house. They're going to find all the bodies. They're going to get into fights with Zhentarim and maybe even some of the Graalhund guards. Really depends on the disposition of the kind of group that you have. The important thing about this, no matter how your players approach this thing, whether they go in themselves or they call in the guards, that Nimblewright is going to escape with the Stone of Galore, and that's going to lead us all the way to Chapter 4. So to nip this in the bud, I would just go ahead and say that Nimblewright just straight up disappears. Whether it uses some magic to get away, it turns invisible, it goes in the sewers, whatever the case may be, that thing has to get away in order for the chapters to continue on. You could, of course, change up the entire story structure if your players get their hands on the Stone of Galore early, but that's entirely up to you. Chapter 4 is all about the chase of the Stone of Galore, and theoretically your players could lose the Stone of Galore and have it stolen during other times. But of course that changes the dynamics of this campaign. Is this a goofy style adventure where your players get an object, it gets stolen from them, and then they have to go and steal it from someone else, and then someone else gets it stolen from, etc., etc.? You can definitely have that style of adventure. But running it as written, this is typically how it goes. Now, getting into this villa isn't exactly easy. There is a 12-foot wall all around, which actually really isn't too hard. If you have a single person helping you out, you can easily scale this thing. But the real issue is the fact that you're breaking into some noble's estate, in which case if anybody spots you, then you are in trouble. You can make a DC 15 stealth check, but something that's really cool here, and a mechanic that I strongly recommend you use in all sorts of various aspects of your game, is you can go ahead and have one PC take disadvantage on the roll, and this will give advantage to somebody else. I really like that because that definitely rewards some group dynamicism. It means the people with low rolls can at least succeed a little bit more, and it means the people with high rolls actually have a bit more of a risk. That's a pretty fun mechanic. We get an awesome overview about the specific dimensions of this location, and of course all the interactions that are going on around here. This place is busy, so there's interactions day and night. You can make a DC 15 athletics check, try and scale this thing without the aid of climbing gear. But of course, if you've got two people helping each other out, you wouldn't even need a roll, really. If a monstrously loud noise, specifically a spell, goes off, then the guards will be alerted and show up in a pretty sizable force, really. A mage and 6 veterans. That's actually a pretty strong party right there. And also, all the ceilings in the mansion are 20 feet high. In Area 1, we have the locked gates. Your players could theoretically try to bash their way through here, or they could go ahead and try and pick the lock. But more often than not, most people will just climb anywhere along the walls anywhere else. In Area 2, we have the yard. We get a nice description of the balcony, but much more impressively and disturbing is the fact that there is an evil groundskeeper. During the day, this groundskeeper is just doing their groundskeeper jobs, along with 2 mastiffs. But at night, their visages disappear and they become 3 shadows. So more than likely, most people are going to try and break into a building at night because that's just the time of day that you break into things. So your players could theoretically get into a fight with some shadows, which would be really bad. They can't sneak past them with a DC 13 stealth check, however. In Area 3, we have the coach house. This is another location your players could go ahead and try and break into, as there is an open door to the outside. Your players could make a DC 20 dexterity check with thieves' tools. Inside of this location, your players will be able to meet Ike, a commoner who thankfully doesn't know what's going on. And also we find a horse named Maladar, who's actually really pimped out. Maladar has in their possession, on their hooves, horseshoes of speed, which are pretty cool. This makes that horse go zooming, as horseshoes of speed give you an additional 30 feet. You cannot put this on yourself, however, they can only be worn by horses. In Area 4, the guard barracks, really nothing too special going on here, but it may be one of the first locations your players walk into because this thing appears to be more open. There isn't a main walkway to get here, but of course, it is just an inviting place. In Area 5, the kitchen, just another place your players are going to walk through that makes this place feel real. And it's once your players enter the main house, that is definitely when you should go ahead and announce that there is some scuffles going on somewhere. It could be muffled because it could be going on either downstairs or upstairs, but there should definitely be some commotion going on. And once your players walk around, they'll definitely see some bodies on the floor. In Area 6, the pantry, your players could theoretically make their way through here if they succeeded on a DC 20 athletics check. But more importantly, when they finally make their way inside of here, whether they be from the inside or the outside, they're going to see the bodies of several servants who were slain. Pretty sad. In Area 7, the laundry room, once again, more bodies on the floor here, but very interesting to note is that there is a ring of keys which will give access to other areas in this mansion, as well as there is a staircase located inside of here which leads up to the 2nd floor. In Area 8, we have the Great Hall. Your players make their way inside of here, and they can hear, finally, the swords of fighting going on upstairs, but they may be a little bit preoccupied as they'll be dealing with 2 Zentarum thugs who are going to go ahead and strike out against them. These guys totally just got done killing some people as their maces are bloodied. In Area 9, the Parlor, this is where Ursel Floxen was held, and there was 2 guards watching over him, but they weren't watching too well. Ursula got the drop on them, killed them both, and then incited the riot in this house. In Area 10, the den and trophy room, nothing too fancy going on here, except that there is a hawk, because the lord of the house recently took up falconry as a hobby. In Area 11, we have Orund's study. Your players can make their way in here after dealing with the lock with a DC 15 dexterity check with thieves tools, but once they make their way inside of here, they'll discover that this is just an angsty teen's room with nothing too much going on, but it does tell a pretty cute tale. In Area 12, the family library, your players could theoretically make their way inside of here. You know, typically this is done in a rush job. Your players usually hear combat going on and decide, okay, we're going to go up there and deal with it. But, you know, maybe your players are just extremely curious and come here either early on, later on, or they just don't care about the combat going on, whatever the case may be. They can find a locked tome, and if they decide to try and open up this locked tome using thieves tools, they can open it. But if they open this up with anything else besides Lady Graalhund's chain around her neck, then 3 specters are going to emerge and attack, and this will be really scary because if they're only level 3 and going against 3 specters and whatever else they have to go up against, that could be quite a heavy ordeal. After dealing with the specters, or if they somehow stole the chain earlier, then your players will be able to read from this tome and discover that the Graalhunds make deals with devils in order to give birth to tieflings. Pretty cool. In Area 13, we have the upstairs foyer. Your players, if they rush in here, then there will be a battle commencing. However, something to note is you should have a timer happen right as soon as your players make their way inside of here, because it's going to be unrealistic that if they hear battle go on forever and all the time, that no blood is being drawn. I say that if your players make their way inside of the building and they hear combat commencing, then you definitely have some sort of timer beyond, and you can go ahead and start having some people drop. If your players rush in here and get involved with the combat, then of course the Graalhund guards are going to be curious, but if your players are fighting the Zhentarim, they're probably going to be very appreciative of it. And of course, if the PCs and the guards team up to fight the Zhentarim are going to get smashed. But of course, something to note is your players could maybe be on the rampage and decide to fight the guards, in which case that'll be very bad. Because if they fight the guards and anybody lives to tell about it, then they're going to be ousted as people that attacked guards and or the actual nobles of this estate, and that carries a severe penalty. If they attacked any of the nobles, that's in fact death. In Area 14, the ballroom, your players could theoretically just say, hey, there's combat going on, let's go ahead and check out this room. And they go inside, and there they see a ballroom. Of course, this place would be pretty awesome during business hours, but this is not business hours. There's some combat going on. In Area 15, we have the guest suite. This is where your players, if they rush in time, they can find Ursula and Orund Graalhund. Ursula does in fact have the stat block of an assassin, but thankfully he is already wounded and he does not have that poison coated on his weapon, making his CR much lower and thus much more manageable by the party. Ursula is trying to get to Orund Graalhund because if he captures him and puts him at knife point, he can go ahead and trade him for the Stone of Galore. But your players could theoretically interrupt this whole process, and even if he does get Orund Graalhund, the Stone of Galore is already long gone. If your players come in here and deal with Floxen, or Floxen runs away, and then they get to Orund Graalhund, then they can go ahead and interrogate this guy. In the heat of the moment, if they are able to intimidate him, he can go ahead and give off some great information here in regards to the Stone of Galore and betraying Ursula Floxen, and even how House Graalhund had a hand in the kidnapping of Renaer Neverember. In Area 16, we have the master bedroom. Your players, once they battle the way through, they can eventually find Yala Graalhund and her half-orc personal bodyguard, Khrabaz. So once your players have dealt with the Zhentarim located inside of the house, and especially if they haven't attacked any guards, then the Graalhunds are going to say, hey, perfect, you did us a great service. But they are going to lie their asses off. They're not going to tell anybody anything, because of course, why would they? They don't want to. If Orund is caught by himself and your players interrogate him alone, then yeah, they can learn some information. But Yala is going to be tight-lipped. She doesn't want anybody to know anything. And in fact, if the party does anything to press her, then she could theoretically use her weight as a noble to make sure that the players do not interfere. If your players come here and they are picking fights, if they are battling the Graalhund guards, and then they make their way in here in a combative state, then Yala Graalhund is going to go ahead and run away into Area 18 to protect her children. and your players are going to be left fighting her boss. What's really cool to note is if your players actually loot this place, then they can actually find that there is in fact some devil worshipping stuff to be found here. In a hidden compartment inside of a locked chest, your players can find 2 holy symbols of Asmodeus as well as 2 robes. And this is of course belonging to the cult of Asmodeus, led by the Castellanters. Because, you know, all the cool rich nobles are getting into devil worship these days. Area 17, the balcony, you know, just a balcony your players could theoretically overlook. There is the fun possibility that your players could come from the outside and decide to leap onto this balcony, in which case they can come from behind, and when they come from behind, then Herbaz is going to see this and try and protect Yala, and then your players can see beyond the door that there's a fight going on. Definitely a unique way to approach this whole combat situation. In Area 18, we have the children's room, once again guarded by a locked door. Your players bust their way inside of here, or if just over the course of the time they make their way in here, there's going to be 2 children in here. Hopefully nothing bad happens to them because, hey, we're playing, you know, a Skyrim-like game where nothing bad ever happens to kids. And in Area 19, we have the Servants Wing. So your players can only make their way in here if they come through the stairs down in the Servants area. They'll see 9 commoners all armed with improvised weapons, and they'll go ahead and attack if they feel threatened. But of course, hopefully your players aren't threatening. So once again, this is another great example of your players dictating the actions going on here. How is this approached? If your players come in here and they just fight everything they see, including the Graalhund guards, then they could be in some serious trouble. And of course, once the guards arrive, then some bad things could happen. Of course, if they kill the Graalhunds, then maybe there's no witnesses or whatever. Maybe they can get away with it. But hopefully they are on the good side of this morality and only kill the Zentarum who are totally evil. If your players save the Graalhunds, then they are going to be grateful, and maybe some things will slip, maybe some things will occur, but nothing too major because they don't want to give anything away. But here's the thing. No matter how your players approach the situation, whether they go ahead and storm the place, they fight the Zentarum and the Graalhunds, they just send in the guards, whatever the case may be, no matter how this goes down, the guards are going to know about this sooner or later. Not because word gets out, but because people are missing. Of course, a whole bunch of commoners going missing is going to leak, and the guards are going to go ahead and investigate this place, and they're going to discover, oh yeah, there was an absolute bloodbath here. Once again, Barnabas Blastwind and Safe Cromley are going to go ahead and check this place out, and they're going to go ahead and try and discover anything they can. But they are somewhat blinded by the fact that the Graalhunds are nobles and are going to lie to the investigators, and unfortunately the guards are going to have to comply. So this is not entirely a dead end for your players in their search for the Stone of Galore and eventually the Vault of Dragons. As we can see in the next chapter, your players will begin to follow the trail and eventually find the Stone of Galore that they're seeking. But this is a great way to make an enemy, an antagonist, or potentially an ally with the Graalhunds, and of course the Zentarum, and maybe even Ursula Floxen. There are so many great dynamics to be had here, whether who lives, who dies, and what actions are taking place, and who talks in what manner, because this is just setting up the world. The fact that the Graalhunds are interacting with the Zentarum, but there is a shift in dynamics, and the fact that Yala Graalhund herself has a tie with the villain of the course of the campaign. The fact that there's all these connections to be found in here is just absolutely awesome, and that's why this chapter is actually pretty cool. So of course, word is going to spread that the Zentarum did an absolute number on this place, and the guards of this city are going to say, hey, no more Zentarum, screw you all. Even though there is a distinct difference between the Manchun Zentarum and the Doom Raiders Zentarum, it doesn't matter, everyone's going to get picked up, including the Doom Raiders themselves, or at least they're going to try to, and potentially any of your PCs if they are open members of the Zentarum and of course get caught. So if any of your players are in fact part of the Zentarum and they regularly interact with Davos Starsong, then bad news for them, Davos Starsong is going to get picked up, but Istrid Horn is going to avoid all this, and she's in fact going to interact with the party member that is part of the Zentarum, and you can have a fun dynamic where she joins your party in the Troll Skull Manor, and of course there's a lot of great roleplay potential we have with that. She does not like having to deal with all this, but if your players are able to deal with her bad attitude, then they've got a whopping 50 platinum pieces in store, which is huge. That's a ton of gold. And that's it. That is chapter 3 right there. So the interesting thing about this is for the level advancement, if you're leveling up the characters using story milestone instead of tracking XP, the characters advance from 3rd to 4th level if they conducted their own investigation into the fireball and affected the outcome of the Graalhund Villa. Otherwise, they are still at 3rd level at the start of Chapter 4. Which, it's one of those things, right? You definitely reward proactiveness. You definitely want to reward people going out there. But if you do have a bunch of Harry Potter players that just sit back and have the story come to them, then I don't say punish them, right? Maybe, it really depends on the kind of campaign that you're trying to run here. But maybe have them at least level up at some point around here, because some of the encounters that they'll be getting into can be a little bit tough. This chapter is a love letter to all those action movies that you've seen before, as it gets your players invested in the storyline. Now they have information about a thing they want to chase after, the Stone of Galore. They know it exists, they know it's around here somewhere, they know that it leads them to the Vault of Dragons, but they just need to get their hands on it. And of course, that is what Chapter 4 is going to be all about. It's all about the chase. It's all about finding that thing, eventually getting it, and then eventually using it to get what they want. But of course, along the way, that is when those villains are going to hamper your players' progress, and there's going to be all those fun things scattered throughout the city to allow your players to once again feel the life of this city as they explore around. It's an amazing time. So go ahead and tell me, do you think Chapter 3 is going to be easy for your players, or do you think it's going to be an absolute slog as they try to investigate every single which way? Do you think that your players are going to be able to find all the pertinent pieces of information, or are they going to find one little thing and just latch onto that one clue, and it's going to lead them to the final destination? How do you think your players are going to handle the Graalhund villa? Are they going to storm right in and start bashing heads, or are they going to kind of just sit back and watch and wait? All those things really affect the final outcome here, because having some allies in the Graalhunds could be big, but of course having them as enemies could be destructive. They are practically next door neighbors in the grand scheme of things. They're only a few hundred feet away. So trying to piss them off could be pretty bad, especially because doing anything bad to nobles in the city is a death sentence. So go ahead and tell me all those things, because I want to know, but that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all my amazing patrons up here. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. That's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for listening. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.